Hi everyone, today we're going to do the doors and windows. This is optional. You might want to do them once they're in situ, but I like to do them before I build. We've got the round windows here for the upstairs gable end, and we've also got the square windows for the, if you wanted to have the square window in the gable end, the front windows for the wall panel and the door frames. This is all in matte board. And then in craft board, which is the black and it's thinner than matte board, this is a larger door frame surround which creates a stop for the door. We've got some wooden sort of planks to make a faux wood effect front door. And I've also cut all the cross struts for the window panes in the black craft board. They're quite fiddly to paint, so if you can get a colour matched matte or craft board for your project, it's so much easier. I did have some black matte board, but it had a white core, so I've gone with the white. And I've attached them to masking tape, sort of doubled back on itself onto a piece of card, and I'm going to spray them with a matte black paint. I like to spray them, it gives a better finish and it's easier to get into the detail. But you could paint them with acrylic or anything else you've got to hand. So they look pretty yucky when they're all sprayed up. I didn't get all the angles because I ran out of spray paint halfway through that. But it did a good enough job for me to be able to touch up. And you can see there, when you spray or when you paint generally, you can see that bit I missed there, it raises the fibres in the material, so you might want to sand those down. And here we have the front wall. We're just dry fitting to show where the frames go. And these are fairly simple frames. We've got a front and a back, and then we sandwich the pane of glass, which is acetate, in between the front and back frames using these craft board spacers. And then depending on the thickness of your clear plastic material, you could use more or less spacers to make it a really nice snug fit. And it's really as simple as that. We've also included the internal shape of the windows to cut out in acetate or plastic. You might want to do that by hand, it's not a difficult job. Not all sort of acetates and plastics are easy to cut as others, so see what you've got at hand. Plastic packaging, if it's stiff enough, is fine too. So here I'm just removing all the pieces from the sprayed board. I've actually got two more window frames there than I need, the two square ones, because I'm doing the round ones this time. And then what I'm going to do is just get a small piece of sandpaper and roughly go over all of the pieces and the edges to take off any raised bits, and it makes them fit better as well if there's nothing sticking up. So I'll work my way through all the pieces from left to right. And I've sped this bit up. I think it took me about 15-20 minutes in all. And then we have a nice bundle of frames. The next thing we're going to work on is the front door. We have two pieces of matte board which we've sprayed black, and two very thin hinges I got from a Dollhouse shop online. And we're going to sandwich those two hinges in between each side of the door. They do open better sort of or more fully one way than the other, so work out which way they're opening and just make sure you get the top and bottom one in the same direction. One will have a flatter side and then the other has the bumpy side where the hinge of the barrel is. So you can see that there. And if you want the door to open one way more than another, it's a good idea to check which way you want the door to open and have a play with the hinges to make sure that that's going to fit. You can get technical and measure out the distance between the hinges, or you can eyeball them. To be honest, you don't really notice the difference. when it's installed. Certainly not for the sake of a few millimetres. So I just use super glue for a quick grab, not a lot. And make sure you keep your fingers out of the way and do this in a very well ventilated space. You could also use tweezers to push this down. And I just placed it on top, and the sort of barrel part of the hinge butted up to the door, so you knew when to stop. And I'm using my Cricut scoring tool there to press that down. I'll do the other hinge the same. Again, making sure the most prominent piece of the barrel, in this case, is facing the mat. If you do ever get stuck with super glue, acetone nail varnish is really helpful on a cotton bud to remove it. And that will go off quite quickly. And just check that the hinges are still the way you want them to be. Then we're going to glue the other half of the door on top. And it makes a really nice hinged door. So I'm just using some wood glue here. You could use tacky glue to sandwich the two pieces together. It's nice to spread it out to all the edges so you can't see any gaps. I love this little spreader, otherwise I'd do it with my fingers. And I know you shouldn't really be in contact with substances that much, but if in doubt, a little finger makes a really good glue spreader. Put a little bit over the hinges so that the door will stick to the hinge. You don't want any in the hinge, otherwise it will just seize up and won't move. And don't get too stressed about making the doors and windows. You can always recut them. If you paint something wrong, glue something wrong, then just recut them and start again. It's the best thing about the Cricut. Nothing's ever really a problem unless you only ever had 2 hinges in the whole world. You'd have to wait for some more to be delivered online, but most things can be fixed. And if not, we can recut them. I think I was icing a cake for a competition, the amount of time I spend on this. So we join the 2 pieces together, make sure all the edges match up. And you can see there the edges didn't get painted with the spray when I ran out, so I'll have to touch those up by hand with black paint. If you can get a matte board with a core the same colour, that's ideal. And you can get black core matte board. I just didn't have any and didn't want to wait for some to be delivered. So that's our door finished. I don't add the handles in this. It's up to you. You might have hardware already that you'd like to add, or make your own out of polymer clay. I'll leave that up to you. These are the two pieces of matte board, the door frames. And now we're going to construct the door in the frames before we actually build the front wall into the structure. Again, this is completely optional. I just find this so much easier. And I like to press everything that I glue. It closes up the really tiny gaps, and that adds for a much more realistic finish. And so we see there we're going to sort of sandwich the hinges between the wall and one of the door frames. So choose your inside and outside wall. I know this green wall is my interior wall, and I want my door to open inwards, so I'm just checking out the way that the door naturally opens with the hinges. And see how easy this is when it's flat. We just put the door in the space, we'll glue the frame over the top, and it's that simple. This does mean you won't be able to remove the door without taking the matte board frame off of the back in the future, should you wish to. But this was the easiest way I could think of to install a door. You could also use ribbon, sandwich a piece of ribbon between the front and back of the door, and then you would glue that here onto the wall. I'm marking out where the hinges are. And then once I'm sure I'm happy where the hinges fit on the main wall, I bring in the matte board door frame. Make sure I line it up with all the edges. And I press down with the matte board over the hinge. And that gently pushes into the matte board and sort of creates marks. Then I know where the hinge just protrudes slightly, and that might stop the door opening fully. So depending on your hinge, just make sure to check this out. And again, minding your fingers, I'm just going to score out or cut out sort of a little recess where the hinges are. I'm going to go and get my matte board now, because my cutting board. I realise I'm using my silicone mat. So just using a knife blade and a ruler, just cut a little section out. The mat board is fairly easy to cut. Just do sort of light passes several times, and it should go through quite easily. This is probably one of the more fiddly bits in the whole build. And if you didn't want the door frame on even, you can see in the picture there, you could just glue the hinges straight onto the wall. And if things were different colours, mine are quite sort of contrasting colours so you can see them, but if they were all similar colours, say you'd left it natural wood chipboard with a wood effect door, you wouldn't even see that. So the great thing about this build is you can make it sort of as plain or as detailed as you like. So we try the door again. Make sure that it's fitted up into the gap so that when you open the door it doesn't drag on the floor. And then dry fit the door frame. And then because I don't think I cut exactly a large enough gap, I go back. I need to take a little bit more out. That's always better, isn't it, to cut slightly less than you think, because you can always cut more. So here's a speeded up video of me faffing and fiddling around. And then there's some lovely, nice flush hinges. So the next bit, again, is optional. You could have a plain door, create a panel door. We've included these sort of faux planks because I think for a cottage in the woods, a little plank door would look quite cool. And they're spaced to fit exactly on there with just the tiniest of gaps. So to space things out more easily, I decided to do the two outside ones first. And for this one I'm going to use a glue stick. The craft board is quite thin. The glue stick has less water in it, and so it's less likely to warp. And I just use this mat here so I can kind of glue over the edges. And this glue also grabs quite quickly and gives you a little time to manoeuvre things around, and then just dries really nice and clear. So you want to make sure you go all the way to the edges so you don't have any of the panels lifting off. Line it up, and just sort of squish it down so it's flat. Again, you can eyeball this one. It's just kind of literally butt them up to each other. And I didn't really press them down too much at this point in case I needed to move them. Hey presto, really easy planked door effect. I'll use my brayer here just to make sure I've squished out any air gaps, and then it's pushed all down nice and flat. I spotted one that was overhanging one edge too much. And if one dried overhanging a bit, you could easily just trim that off with your knife. So we do the same on the other side. So that's the door finished, other than adding a door handle. An easy peasy door. So we've got our front wall with the door and window holes. We've got the mat board door frame which accommodates the hinges. And we need to decide, when you know the way the door is opening, if you want to place the door stop piece. Now if you see, the craft board version is very thin and black. There's only one of those and it'll be slightly thicker than the mat board door frame. And it's designed to specifically overhang the gap for the door by just enough to stop the door being able to open through that gap. So this will make sure that your door only opens inwards if you put the craft board on the outside, or it will open outwards if you put it on the inside. So for me, this black facing wall is the outside of my house. I want my door to open inwards, so this craft board also goes on the outside. So if you want it opening inwards, put it on the outside and vice versa. We simply glue that. Again, I'm using the glue stick. You'll notice at this point the door hasn't been glued in on the rear side in the frame. It doesn't matter in which order you do this. Lightly press it down, and then you want to turn it over so you can see that it's sticking out. And actually that was an easier way to do it. Lie it flat and bring the piece down onto it. So you've just got a very, very small sticking out piece of craft board, and that's all that you need to stop the door opening back the way you don't want it to open. Once you're happy where it is, press it down. And then check again. Because things often move when you press them down. Of course, I've got glue on the inside now, so that might be a reason not to have the door glued in, because the door might accidentally go against that sort of glued open edge of the craft board. But you could always glue the wall instead of the craft board. So if you have already fitted your door at this point, I would just put the glue on the outside wall. Then this is the matte board frame, so the thicker frame. There's another one that goes on the inside holding the hinges. This literally will just glue on top of the craft board. I'm using Aleene's tacky glue for this one. I kind of chop and change whatever I've got to hand. Another good reason for installing the doors and windows while it's flat is, of course, if they were vertical, things want to fall off with gravity more, whereas if you lay them down, they stay where they are. Glue can look a bit shiny if it's squeezed out and dried. So if you want a completely matte look, you want to reduce the amount that it squeezes out as much as you can. but you could always go over it with a matte varnish or sealer. And then you'll see then where the mat board is slightly smaller than the craft board, you get a really nice layered effect as you're looking at the front of the door. Just using a cocktail stick to wipe excess glue away. So we leave that aside now to dry, put some weights on it if you want it to be really flat with no gaps. Our door is now dried. I need to paint the edges. So I'm just using a black acrylic paint for this. Being careful not to go over onto the craft board because you will see any overspill. Just wipe it off quickly if you do that. And mat board can be quite porous in the core of it, so you might find over time you need to go back and just give it a second coat. These are the holes that I cut for the hinges in the door frame. They've exposed the white mat board. Then I just go over every single window, touching up bits. I've left some bits a little bit faded because actually for the Witches Cottage I think it suited the look, especially on the inside. Just checking for holes and gaps. And then going back to the walls, which are chipboard, and remember I didn't spray them first. You can see the window openings and door openings are chipboard coloured. I'm just doing the edge of the mat board door frame here, but I also need to go back and colour in the inside of the window holes, the door frame, and then just be mindful where on the edges of the big pieces, if you're going to put glue on that edge, you don't really want to paint it because the glue might stick to the paint but the paint comes off. So try and keep any gluing edges raw and unpainted. So here we try the door in the hole, and the craft board slightly oversized door frame stopped the door falling through the hole, which is exactly what we want. And that means the door can't open outwards. I'm just putting a little few marks here so that when I go to glue the hinges on, I know where to put the glue. Again, use as little glue as you can get away with. You can always re-glue it if it comes unstuck immediately. You don't want a lot of glue squeezing out and getting into the hinge. Let's glue my head in this bit. I obviously had a different camera angle and I really needed to look over the top of the project to make sure it was all lined up so that the door was even. And again, be careful. Don't do what I'm doing. Use something else to push the super glue down on the hinges. Check the door opens, it's level. And it only opens one way. now got the window frames, they're dry, and we've got the window inserts, which are craft board, so they're thinner. And you'll need to have a little practice, because depending on the thickness of your clear material, it'll depend on how many of those internal cross members you'll need. And they just stop the plastic rattling round in the frame. So all I'm doing here is dry fitting it. I'm not going to glue it until I know. So I do 2 pieces of craft board, 1 piece of plastic film, then I put another 2 pieces of craft board, and I could have got away with 1, I was almost borderline, but I liked that with the 2 in there it was completely snug. And then see if you can, or if you fit the outer frame on, you don't want it to bow and push away, so you do want it to rest. I'm just checking there that it's not bowing too much. So what I'm going to do now is glue these internal cross struts in pairs. Again, I'm using the glue stick. It's nice and quick, and there's not a lot of water in there. Can't get things off my mat again. It's a super grippy mat, even when you don't want it to be. So line them up. Gently press them together. And they don't need to be particularly structurally strong, because they're going to just get sandwiched inside of the window frame. There'll be no sort of other pressure on them than the frames pushing in them from each side. And what I use here is a piece of greaseproof paper, so the glue doesn't stick to it. And I, off camera, got a really big piece of granite, a worktop saver. So a lot of my pieces I put under there, I literally put it down over the pieces. So this is a mini version, desktop version, with a steel bench block. So you just put them in there with a weight on top. It's a really nice flat weight, and that just helps push them together while the glue dries. Stops them buckling. And then the greaseproof paper stops them sticking to the block. But I would thoroughly recommend getting a granite worktop saver, because it's got a nice big flat area, so you can press a lot of pieces at once. So now we're going to fit the outside window frame. I use tacky glue for this. You could use wood glue. And again, it's just that enough glue to stick, not enough glue to squeeze out amount that's needed. Give it a good press down. Then turn it over to make sure it's not overhanging too much in one direction or the other. I'm getting a piece of metal now that I've got that's got a nice flat edge, which is great for lining things up. And then I turned it over and it fell off, so I need more glue. I'm just looking down from the top there to see if there's any gaps as well. And then because the door is 2 layers of matte board thick, it makes the door lift the wall away from the mat. So to even that out, I've put the piece of chipboard under one side there, and it enables me to put the weight on and press down that window evenly all over. And then just do the same with the other side. And use another piece of chipboard and weight that one down. Now these are the craft board inserts for the windows. I'm just using a normal glue stick and sandwiching 2 together. And then I've got a sheet of greaseproof paper, and they go off to my granite slab to be pressed. So once the outside window frames have dried, we get our dried inserts, and we've got 4 here, 2 for each side, and they go either side of the piece of plastic, which acts as the glass. So I'm just going to double check that it all fits. And you could use whatever glue you wanted here. To get a quick grab and not have any seepage, I'm just using dots of super glue. There shouldn't be too much pressure on these at all, so I didn't really feel like it needed a super duper sort of heavyweight glue all over it. The pressure from both of the inside and the outside window frames kind of keep them in their place anyway. But I think you do need some glue so that they don't move around and then go out of alignment, and you'd see that easily because of the cross. As always, use ventilation and be careful not to super glue yourself to your project. The exciting bit, putting the plastic in. I think this is where they really, the house comes to life. Now, I haven't actually got the video showing this bit, but I'd taken the other cross of the window pane inserts and glued those on to the inside window frames. So those window frames already have the cross inserts glued to them because you don't want to glue them to the glass. And the cross frame in there sort of helps locate that window because the cross frame edge is exactly where you need it to line up with the hole in the window. So the frame that you're looking at now has the double layer of the inner cross frame already glued to it. That was one of those things where I'm sure I videoed it, but I can't find it. You could do all of the window frames like that. It's a personal choice. For me, it's just a little bit trickier when you've got the cross frames already glued on to sort of push the whole thing on and jiggle them a little bit and make sure they've popped down into the gap. So if you look at it from the side and the top, you'll be able to see if the outside window frame isn't lying flush. We do the same to the other side. And again, this frame has the inner pieces glued in already. Make sure they're located in and it's all flush. There's something about when the glass goes in, I think, it just really, really looks like it's coming to life. And weigh those down. So just while they dry, keep them nice and flat. I'm just moving it out of the way so I can carry on my mat. And now this is the gable end of the attic room window, which I just love that I changed it out for a round window. Again, it's the same process for all of our windows. You've got the inner cross pieces and the outer frames. And what you're seeing here is one of our other SVG files. It's a clock face with the kind of nice iron work Roman numeral ones. And I was just having a play here because I suddenly thought it would probably look really sweet to have that in there as a window. And I don't put it in this instance, but I do think that looks really cute. So I was just having a play around with that. And I think it would look brilliant with the light coming through the window from behind. So that's something I'll do another day, I think. So at this point I realise I haven't yet glued the cross struts into one of the outside frames. So I quickly go and do that. I do the same for the other side, and then I put them both off under the press to dry. So while they're drying, we're working on the inside of the front panel, and we're going to glue the mat board door frame surround on. Just check it all fits, that the door opens okay. With these hinges, it did just need to sort of push back a little bit against the mat board. So I made sure when I glued it on that it was maybe about 1 millimetre sort of away, pushed to one side. You can't even see it. And you want to make sure it's exactly level with the bottom of the wall, so that when you come to glue the wall onto the floor, it doesn't rock at all. If it overhung slightly, you can always just trim that off. But it's designed to fit exactly, because if it overhung too much at the bottom, it probably would inhibit the door opening further up. So line that up as best you can. I've got 2 clips there to make sure it doesn't move. Just checking that the door opens. And then I'm using as many clips as I can get into quite a small area, just to sort of push down around and make sure that that frame is going to have a nice contact with no gaps. A little bit more difficult on the hinged side. Again, I'm just sort of supporting it from underneath to raise it up. Then I've got some weights that I can put where I can't get the clamps to go. You could stand there and hold it while it dries, but I like to get on with other stuff, hence my whole clamps and weight combinations. Right, so we're back now with the gable end window. The window frames have dried. And this time I decided to sort of pre-glue both the inside and the outside one to see how that would work. And then you've got a choice really, whether you have it, the sort of cross struts going exactly vertically and horizontally, or whether you want to offset them maybe diagonally. Again, I just eyeball this. I could measure it out, but I think eyeballing it was fine. Make sure it's pressed around the edge, nice and flat. Fit the plastic window pane. Check that the next frame also fits, and it will locate where the cross struts have been glued onto it. And you could put glue on the cross struts so that they glue to the glass pane or plastic pane, but sometimes glue can cause a blooming sort of like a light fog effect. So where possible, I don't like to put anything in glue in contact with it. You can get some glues that specifically don't mist glass, but they can be expensive, especially if you don't need to use them. You can save yourself having to buy them. Doesn't that look cute? So there we are, that's the end of chapter 2. We've got a functioning door, fabulous windows, and we can now go ahead and start construction. So I'll see you in chapter 3 when things really begin to take shape. Thank you for watching today, and I'll see you soon.